Hello, everybody. Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government here. First of all, I want to offer my prayers to those who've lost their lives to the shameful attack by Hamas on Israel. Um, it's a grim day, and anytime people shoot at each other in the Middle East, it has uh, extra consequences. It's always been a powder keg. And this weekend did not made the world a much less safe place. And for those families who lost their lives, lost their loved ones, there in Israel as a result of this attack by Hamas. That went after civilians. Let's just be clear. That went after civilians, made a point of going after civilians, and it is in a well-planned effort. Uh, my heart goes out to them. Let's talk about what's happened and how and some of the controversy related to U.S. policy. Um, we have, Joe Biden was in the news in the last couple of weeks because we gave Iran $6 billion in exchange for and exchanged five Iranians to go back to Iran in exchange for five Americans. And they got access to $6 billion that was being held of oil money that was being held in a South Korean bank, and not that they were not allowed to withdraw. So we lifted the sanctions off the withdrawal of that money, of that oil and money, and it then made its way to Qatar. So that money is now in a bank in Qatar. The administration, through Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, who negotiated this deal, rejects the idea that $6 billion in Iranian assets helped Hamas. I'm going to show you a Washington Post article on this. And so here we've got Blinken rejecting the notion. And what he essentially says is that while the money's sitting in Qatar, the U.S. government is monitoring it and making certain that it doesn't get spent for anything other than humanitarian assistance. The obvious problem is the money's fungible, and $6 billion that was intended for humanitarian assistance from other sources in the Iranian government could very easily then be shifted to terrorist support, and and replaced with the humanitarian assistance that the United States made it so easy for Iran to get. I don't think it can be lost on anyone that the Iranian government specifically pushed back when Blinken claimed a couple of weeks ago that it could only be used for humanitarian assistance by saying we'll use it for however we want to use it. And I don't think you can miss the point that while Blinken has stated that, and this was yesterday, he stated that they didn't have any evidence that Iran was involved, although they were. In fact, I'll give you that quote so you can see it. Right here, you'll see it. Blinken also said he had not seen evidence that Iran directed or was behind this particular attack, but there's certainly a long relationship. Well, Blinken may not have seen the evidence, but perhaps he should read the Wall Street Journal, because the Wall Street Journal reported yesterday, and this is an update from in the evening yesterday, that from Dubai, Iranian security officials helped plan Hamas's Saturday surprise attack on Israel and gave the green light for the assault at a meeting in Beirut last Monday, according to senior members of Hamas and Hezbollah from Iran-backed militia group. So here's what we know. We know apparently we're not monitoring very much about what Iran's actually doing. They're running around sitting in meetings with Hamas and Hezbollah. What could go wrong? Two of their protagonistic allies who are fronts for the Iranian Revolutionary Guard in creating terror around the world. A meeting in Beirut apparently set up this whole thing and gave the go-ahead. So I guess giving the go-ahead from Iran to go ahead with it is not the same as being connected in some way. But the fact that this article was actually out in the public domain when Blinken made his comments about having no proof, I understand things move fast, but it shows a weakness in our intelligence community, which should have known this, should have at least said, yes, there's evidence of Iranian involvement. We're paying very close attention to them. Or, B, they could have read the Wall Street Journal. I don't know. It's I'm not to be too flip, but scares the heck out of me if Blinken's telling the truth. We are absolutely blind around the world while we're sitting there busy trying to surveil every single Trump supporter in America. We're so focused on surveilling Trump supporters that we don't surveil actual terrorists. If that's true, or perhaps Blinken just didn't pay his subscription to the Wall Street Journal, and nobody around there did. So let's just be clear. That $6 billion was available for Iran to use for whatever they wanted to use it for. They just shift money around and then go and send a bill off for humanitarian aid off to the bank in Qatar. So it was available to the Iranians. Secondly, what a lot of people don't realize is the Hamas leadership aren't in Gaza. Hamas leadership are actually holed up in Qatar, of all places. So you have the bank that holds it is in the same place that the Hamas leadership happens to be holed up. We've got and presumably, that's just a coincidence, but one that struck me at how small world is over there. So don't go by any assurances. Well, Qatar is a friendly country. It's QATAR, because we used to have a base. We had a base there that we used to get reports during the Iraq War from Qatar. Doesn't make it a friendly country. What it makes it is, in fact, they are an antagonistic country, particularly towards Israel, and it is and so this is not a surprise that they would be a whole where the Iranians would send their money. And transfer their money in order to be able to have access to it. So the fact is, Blinken lied. That money's fungible, and Biden made it fungible. And just a few days after that money was released to Qatar, the Iranians said, "Yep, go ahead, attack Israel." So what other problems does Joe Biden have in his relationship with Hamas? In particular, well, when the administration first started, Joe Biden overturned Trump policies that stopped the Palestinians, including Hamas, from receiving $235 million in aid. Donald Trump said, no, these are terrorists. They're attacking Israel, and we're not going to fund them. And Joe Biden said, no, we're going to give them the money. This is from Newsweek, not from a right-wing publication. Is from Newsweek, talking about that policy. Now, once again, all the money didn't go to Hamas, but a significant amount of it did, because Hamas controls Gaza, and so from the very beginning of the Biden administration, in their zeal to overturn everything that was Trump policy, they gave the Palestinians who have been causing trouble on both sides of Israel, but had looked pretty benign in the South and Gaza over the last 3 years, gave them millions upon millions of dollars of U.S. dollars in aid, your tax dollars, going to fund terrorism. That was Joe Biden's opening gambit in terms of Middle East policy, and we see how that's worked out. So there's no clean hands here for the Biden administration. They made a decision to fund Hamas from the very beginning of the administration, and continued to do so. They've made multiple deals with Iran where they released monies. And the recent one that was reported 6 billion, it was really 16 billion, because there's another $10 billion that was released that people don't talk about too much. But you've got a massive commitment by the Biden administration in providing funds and undoing the sanctions that Donald Trump increased against Iran as it became more and more warlike. And that's not something that's disputable. That's just true. So what we have is a Biden administration begging the Iranians to be our friends, while Iran creeps ever closer to having a nuclear device that they can put on top of their medium-range missiles that they can have right now. And we're busy giving them money, so they won't be our friend. Now, Iran exports terrorism. They're exporting terrorism through Hamas. They're exporting terrorism through Hezbollah. They're exporting terrorism through groups that we don't even know the names of in other parts of the world. That's what Iran does. That's what the Ayatollahs are dedicated to. So let's just be clear here. This is not a shocker that Iran was, in fact, at the forefront of giving aid and comfort to those who now hold, according to reports, 9 American hostages. And Iran's sitting there thinking, well, if we got $6 billion for 5, how much can we get for 9? 9 American hostages, at least 4 Americans dead have been reported. These are not combatants. In most cases, there are kids who are at a rave down by the wall along the Gaza Strip, on the southern border of Israel, against the Gaza Strip, who were essentially at a peace demonstration. They're demonstrating, all we're saying is give peace a chance, and really supporting the Hamas side of the wall, and in a condemnation of Israel. And the next thing they know, they've got Hamas fighters executing them, chasing them down, kidnapping them, and raping and murdering them. That's what we know. It's what happened. We can talk about the intelligence failures that obviously Israel's doing a lot of soul searching right now, but the United States intelligence community doesn't come off looking good on this, because we're supposed to be involved in keeping an eye on some of this stuff also. And it's certainly not a good sign that Anthony Blinken is busy saying to people, well, we're not responsible. Our $6 billion wasn't used. I mean, they know what the truth is. And I understand why you don't want to take responsibility for a terrorist attack, but the Biden administration's anti-Israel attitude and the policies of the last 3 years have been unmistakable. The Biden administration, within the last couple of months, has been certainly the last from January to September of this year, have been attacking the government of Israel, the Netanyahu government, for law changes that they were making and have made now, dealing with some judicial reforms in the country. The Biden administration has been fomenting the pushback and the resist movement in Israel against those judicial reforms, which have actually gone so far as to having Israeli defense forces guard people who are in reserve refusing to show up to duty as they were being encouraged to resist. Well, guess what? In this case, resistance means death. When you're sitting there and you provide signs that you're weakened, and that's what the left did in Israel, is they encouraged sending signals that Israel's IDF, their defense force, was weakened, that it encourages attack. When you sit there, and I think it's reasonable to ask the question, did the shutdown, did the people not showing up to work, the distraction of the argument over the judicial policy, which was an important argument to have because it fundamentally makes Israel more democratic rather than less. The judicial councils were running kind of an autocratic oversight that said, well, the people of Israel, you might want to vote that, but you don't get to do so. And was holding into place kind of the some of the aspects of Israel that have been much less, as a group of old men, essentially, are able to dictate anything that happens in Israel. And Netanyahu was trying to change that, and he did. So ultimately, you have a situation where there was a resist movement pushed by American left. There's been a divestment movement pushed by the American left, and those movements have had indicated to the terrorists that Israel was vulnerable, and so Israel was attacked. One example of that is here in response to this is after knowing that women and children were being murdered and being kidnapped by Hamas. Democrats across the country, the Democrat socialist wing of the Democratic Party, held rallies, pro-Palestine rallies, justifying it. Here's some footage on that. It's a let's get it up there. Okay, there you go. So what you have is, this is terrible. Let's see if I can actually get it to be in alignment with the actual screen. Go down a little bit, zoom down a little bit, zoom down a little bit. Okay, so here's what you have. You had Democrats hold shameful pro-Palestine rally. You have the people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez attacking Israel. You had marching in the streets of DC. Here's the march in the streets of DC. I want you to listen very carefully, because what they're chanting is almost unbelievable. Okay, what they're chanting is settler, settler, you will learn, by the millions will return. Essentially saying, we're going to slaughter all of you. Isn't that nice? And by settler, they mean anybody who's come to Israel post World War II. That's what they mean by settler. So this is a march in the streets of DC. You have Representative Tlaib, who has been outspoken. You've got Representative Bush, who's been outspoken. You got Representative Presley, who's been outspoken. You have AOC, who's been outspoken, attacking Israel and saying it is Israel that's responsible for the citizens being slaughtered. And so you end up with statements being made. Here's what the New York City chapter of Democratic Socialist America announced on X, and showing that Elon Musk lets everybody post on there. In solidarity with the Palestinian people and their right to resist 75 years of occupation and apartheid. So this is a declaration of support for slitting people's throats on the streets of kibbutzes. Unarmed, unprotected people who are and attacking them without warning and murdering them and taking many hostage so the Palestinians can have something, the Hamas can have something to negotiate with. Hamas has subsequently announced that for every missile strike, every bomb strike that Israel does into Hamas or into Gaza, that they will kill a civilian hostage. And so they're trying, this is after launching between 2,500 and 3,000 missiles at Israel, killing over 1,000 Israelis, a vast majority of which are civilians. and then taking hostages that they can then try to negotiate a close to the war. Here's their problem. Netanyahu has now said he's going to engage in unrestricted warfare, because when Hamas decided to hit civilian targets, and make no mistake, when they chose to go and take out and go after a peace party, rave of a bunch of kids from all over the world, a bunch of kids, when they decide they're going to attack a bunch of teenagers who are dancing around and having loud music played, and that was their target, as an official target. And they killed 200 people there, over 200 people. And they took hostages from there. One woman they took there, they raped her. They broke her legs so she fit in the back of a pickup truck, and then they paraded her around the streets of Gaza so they could, and the people spit on her body. This was not a combatant. This was a woman who was a social media influencer, and who they claimed as a great victory that they murdered her. Sorry, Netanyahu, when you engage in a war-like activity aimed at civilian targets, you don't then get to say, well, you can't attack civilian targets. Israel's been very, very careful about hitting civilian targets in the past. But one of the things that Hamas does is they hide their military, they hide their headquarters, they hide their arms in schools, they hide them in libraries, they hide them under apartment complexes. And so when Netanyahu says to the people of Gaza, if you're a peaceful civilian, you need to leave, and people don't start streaming out of Gaza, well, they're essentially performing a simple role. Hamas uses the people who live there as human shields, and those people who stay behind, those people who celebrate the great victory of having killed somebody at a rave, people who celebrate that, well, they become combatants. Because if you cheer on the mass murder of 1,000 people as a victory, you lose the right to claim civilian status. And we're now going to watch to see what unrestricted warfare looks like. Israel's already announced they're going to blockade, or they are blockading Gaza. No food, no medical supplies, no humanitarian aid allowed into Gaza at all. There have been numerous airplane, bombing of targets in Gaza, and I think it's fair to know that Israel is right now undoubtedly searching for hostages in Gaza and attempting to find and recover and save hostages through actions that their military is very good at doing. But this is going to get horrible, and I wanted to point to the fact that we're culpable, and it's up to Congress to direct Joe Biden that no more money to Hamas, no more money to the Palestinian Authority, no more money to Iran, and imagine this, aid and support to Israel. One other thing that people have missed or may not have seen is that the United States had stored arms in Israel that were, there to effectively provide extra munitions should Israel need them. Since much of their military are purchased from us, there's compatibility between the munitions that we have and what they need. Well, in January, the Biden administration moved a lot of those munitions out of Israel and gave it to Ukraine. So we depleted the stockpile of munitions in Israel that we were providing to safeguard them. And as a result, they're going to, and they spent a lot of Patriot missile battery missiles to shoot down the 2,500 to 3,000 rockets fired out of Gaza. So there's on first hour. So we've got some things to do. Got some things to do to support our friends. In positive news, the carrier group, the Gerald Ford carrier group is on its way, if not already there, to be in the Mediterranean off the coast of Israel. The Israeli Navy, once again, is blockading Gaza. So you have a blockade by the Israeli Navy of Gaza. And it's things are going to get hotter before they get cold. And it's a dire time. One last thing, and this is just kind of, I wanted to point out, because that there was a report, we had the squad members I mentioned who were basically saying, well, Hamas, Israel deserved it, and so we support the attacks on Israel. And Representative Richie Torres went after them. And he's no conservative anyway, stretch of form. But here's what he said. Hold on, these are all the things the squad people said. Let's get to what he said. Okay, Torres slammed the members of his own party, describing Bush and Tlaib's comments reprehensible and repulsive. U.S. aid to Israel is and should be unconditional, and never more so than in this moment of critical need. Congress must act decisively to provide Israel with whatever it needs to defend itself in the face of unprecedented terrorism. Shame on anyone who glorifies as resistance. The largest single-day mass murder of Jews since the Holocaust is reprehensible and repulsive. And so this is, I give you this because I want you to understand that there's a fight within the Democratic Party for the heart and soul of the Democratic Party. And so while we can talk about the AOC and Tlaib and others, giving aid and comfort to Hamas, to the terrorists, understand not all Democrats are saying, are abandoning Israel and support for Israel, and certainly abandoning a fight against abject terrorism where civilians are targeted. And so that is a welcome sign that there is a sign of life on the Democratic Party. One would also expect that Chuck Schumer, who's long been a supporter of Israel, will be very responsive to any aid package that is to help Israel in this. The other thing that's likely is that, unfortunately, the Biden administration will try to create any aid package to Israel. They'll lump in an aid package to Ukraine and make it you have to vote for one to get the other. And they'll package it that way. And any vote against Ukrainian aid additional Ukrainian aid at that point will be deemed a vote against Israeli aid because they're going to lump them together. That's something to watch out for. Lastly, Harvard University and 31 organizations at Harvard University blame Israel for the attack, much like what we saw in the streets. And it's and a number of people who, Joel Pollack, for instance, who's is both on radio and writes for Breitbart, who is a Harvard grad and has a 25-year reunion coming up, has basically said, I'm having nothing to do with Harvard until these organizations are eliminated from receiving a dime of money from the college, back against the far left lurch of our Ivy League schools, Harvard being one, due to this kind of reprimand. So hopefully others will do the same, and we will have Harvard actually reining in some of the crazy that's going on their campus, at least not funding the crazy that's going on their campus. But look, I'm interested in see what you have to say about all this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm now going to go to the comments and see what people have to say. Now let's see if I can do this in an intelligent way. I need to go there, and then I need to go there. And there we go. Okay, how about that? Dottie Stewart, this Democrat had the courage to speak out, awaiting others. This should be an easy one for the Democrats to show they're not nuts. I know that's hard for them to do, but let's hope it becomes. What I've noticed is that we don't have the ubiquitous Israeli flag on everybody's avatar now. I guess they can't move the Ukrainian flag off of it. These politicians are nothing but cowards. Their policies enslave our nation, bring war to our world for profit and control. We need a real leader. I have no idea what I don't know how I even clicked on it. I don't have any idea what we're talking about there. Ronaldo and Guillen. There's no proof that $6 billion went to Hamas. Stop with the fucking lies. It's not Biden's fault that they attacked Israel. You know, Mr. Guillen, I have to tell you, I just laid out what the obvious proof is. The obvious proof is the money got released, and then Iran meets with Hamas and Hezbollah and says, go ahead and do it. Okay. The obvious fact is that money's fungible, and you sit there and you make money available for one thing. You move money from the pot that would have been spent on that, and you spend it on what you want to do. So when you give money to a terrorist regime like Iran, you end up giving money for whatever Iran does with it, whether it be try to sink cargo ships, oil tankers in the Persian Gulf, whether it's that, or it's exporting terrorism to Yemen, or if it's exporting terrorism to down in the Gaza Strip. Iran is a terrorist state. They have been for a long time. They make no bones about it. So when you give them money, guess what they do? They use it to engage in terrorism, which is their number one reason for existence. So just be clear. You have an interesting perspective, but your perspective lacks any actual credibility. And what's more, Blinken can sit there and say we're monitoring that money all we want, but all they have to do is withdraw it for food aid and for their own citizens, or food aid for Hamas, or food aid for places around the world, and say, oh, it's humanitarian, and spend the money that they would have spent on food aid directly to Hamas. So listen, it is, when you have 1 and 1, you have to be unafraid and say perhaps it equals 2. Let's see. Yeah. Do you want to go to war? You're asking me if I want to go to war? No. The answer is no. I do believe that Israel has a right to defend themselves. I do believe that we have a responsibility to defend our allies. And I do believe that if you let a caged dog, a rabid dog, out of the cage and let it loose amongst people, you have a right to put the rabid dog down. And Hamas has proven themselves right now to be rabid dogs. And Israel has every right to put them down. So does that mean going to war for the United States? No, but it does mean that the United States needs to be supportive of Israel, certainly have more of an obligation to Israel than we do to Ukraine. And I believe that there are things that need to be done. I'll give you a couple of things. Germany and Austria, and I think it was Sweden also, it might've been Norway, but Germany and Austria anyway, for sure, immediately announced that they were cutting all funds to non-governing organizations, NGOs, that were dealing with the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. it's tens of millions of dollars that they're saying we're not going to give to them. We're blocking all that aid because those were all intended for humanitarian purposes, recognizing the money's fungible. So they said, no, you're not going to get that money. And so those NGOs have been cut off from funds from 2 European countries. We should examine every single NGO we're giving money to and cut off the ones that are giving money for humanitarian aid to both the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. That just makes sense. Don't you let third-party nonprofits be pass-throughs so you can say have clean hands? Oh, we're just doing humanitarian aid. Meanwhile, you're buying guns. Okay, so that's a very common sense thing that some of the EU countries have already done, and the United States needs to follow suit. Just as an example. Sadly, Obama sent money to pallets and pallets of cash. We remember pallets and pallets of cash. It's let's see here. Susan Geiderman, we gave the money via Biden to terrorize more. They intend to destroy the globe, bringing war to our doors. The illegal invasion is to cover the terrorists it's bringing in. The Biden administration is horrible. Susan, you are correct. You are correct. In fact, when I was on the radio talking about this morning, I was asked what the repercussions were, and I sat there and said, we need to look at what's happening here. The danger that Israel faces is that the resist movement that was spun up in Israel could lead to there actually being fighting on the streets of Israel, and particularly in the Arab-controlled areas, to have control those areas. Places like Nazareth, which have an Arab mayor, you can end up with them having to retake cities that they'd already taken, and Israel has a system where the Arabs are allowed to vote, allowed to have representatives. So it's they are not the majority, but they're a sizable bloc in Israel. And so the hope for the Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran is that they can foment rebellion internally in Israel and create that kind of fratricide inside the country. So that's the reality. And when you look at what's happened in America, where we've allowed about 4 to 6 million people come in since Biden became president, and many of them are young military-age men who are fleeing their country, many sponsored by the cartels, like most sponsored by the cartels. We've allowed the importation of a foreign army into our own cities, and the danger we face is at some point, we may end up having to fight, not just fight enemies from afar, but fight enemies within on the streets of Chicago and places like that, where effectively you have gang warfare going on now. You've got people dying every day over the fentanyl trade, but a lot of the battle is the battle over control of fentanyl trade, and that battle is being waged from the cartels who want to control the entire supply chain, from manufacture to collecting it at the port where they get it from China, to putting it into packaging that they get across the border, transporting across the border, to selling it on the street. They want to be able to control the entire supply chain, and so a lot of the murders are going on in our streets are drug dealers killing drug dealers, and it's effectively a nationwide takeover of the drug trade. So the cartels will control the drug trade, and basically a foreign entity will control our capacity to even deal with our own problems. So thinking that this is a benign situation, what we have is a foreign invasion, and it's integration of a foreign army into our streets. and it puts us in grave danger. So yeah, um, we face we need to wake up. In fact, the first thing we should do as a reaction to this is close our darn border. Now, Biden won't do that, but we ought to have a vote saying close the border entirely. And let's go and let's start seeking and identifying and getting rid of, booting out those who came here with bad intent, those who are engaged in illegal drug activity and the like, those who are running deals for the cartels. Let's get them out. Let's get the human traffickers out. The victims of human trafficking, we should help them. As a human, we should help them. But those who are engaged in the human trafficking deserve no quarter. And that's that's just straightforward. And that's something we need to do. And quite honestly, the Biden administration won't do it. But if we get a new administration in 2025, and I pray that we do, that's something which has got to be I think my position's changed on this, and we close the border and we still allow legal immigration, but we just shut the border down tight. And then we start cleaning up the mess that's been left behind. And when you have about 1 million gotaways where we don't know who they are and those are the real bad guys. But even the people who are coming up to the Border Patrol, they're not rejecting any of them. They're rejecting like 2%. So you get here, you get put in the country, you get shipped inland, and the cartel maintains absolute control over those people, over a lot of them. They have to pay dues. The cartel knows who their parents are in many cases. The cartel is essentially makes more money off of human trafficking than they do off of drug trafficking. So, we're going to have to fight a war for America. And hopefully it is not a bloody war, but instead is just identifying and shipping people who shouldn't be here, people who are dangerous for them to be here, and getting them out of the country and sending them back to the country that they came from. We'll see what happens with that, but that's going to be one of the major battles of a Trump administration or of any Republican administration, is what to do with the millions upon millions who Biden has opened the door for, most of whom have no reason to be here and many of whom have bad intent. Let's see. Diana. Hamas is Israel what the hijacked radicalized Democrat Party is to America. By that incompetent fool, Joe Biden allowing millions of illegals to cross our borders. We now have terrorist supercells. Hey, I could have just read your thing and it could have saved all sorts of time. Yes, Diana, you're right. You are correct. It is. Eva Julia Ghana, this is awful. I'm so upset about it. Why would the U.S. send $5 billion to a known terrorist state? Well, the answer to that, Eva, is Iran is not viewed as an enemy by the Biden administration. There's a lot of people who have spent a lot of time advocating for Iran, who have very high positions in the Biden administration. And I'm going to do something on this later this week. But I've read a number of things about different people who are compromised by Iran, who are in the Biden administration, and some of the scary places they are actually in charge of and what their jobs are. And so these are some of the top advisors to the Biden administration, to Joe Biden, on what Iranian policy should be. It's why we keep giving them billions of dollars to try to beg them to sign on to a deal onto a arms deal that they never were following. There's essentially there's either a blind eye toward Iranian intent, or it is a deliberate subversion of U.S. policy and change of U.S. policy without coming out forward and saying that we're changing sides in the Middle East. Make no mistake, we did. We changed sides in the Middle East from, let's just be real. The Saudis aren't the greatest guys in the world, okay? But the Trump administration said we could do business with the Saudis. Let's try to create the Abraham Accords and create a strong alliance with Israel and states in the southern part of the Arab world, of the Middle East, as a block against the Iranians and the controlled assets to the north. That was the idea of the Abraham Accords. It was successful, but unfortunately, it wasn't completed. And it's actually the one pathway to peace in the region. And I have argued actually today that this attack by Hamas, sponsored by Iran, may have been an attempt to put Israel in a position where they had to do everything. They had to basically annihilate Hamas, and in doing so, make it so it's very difficult for the Abraham Accords to stand. And because the Abraham Accords do a simple thing. This was Donald Trump's this was a major, Donald Trump should have gotten the Nobel Peace Prize just for this. The Abraham Accords changed the dynamic in the Middle East. It took the Palestinian Authority and Hamas in Gaza and did make them the centerpiece of all negotiations in the Middle East. It put them aside, it made them as a sidecar deal, as opposed to everything revolving around them. And when the Palestinian Authority and Hamas in Gaza were confronted by the idea that they essentially weren't calling the shots, that changed the entire political dynamic. And the fact that other states in the Middle East were saying, agreeing to this, and some in North Africa, Muslim states, were agreeing to this, it kind of blew up the universal belief that you couldn't have peace in the Middle East unless you dealt with the Israeli-Palestinian problem. And given that Hamas and the Palestinian Authority and Iran and others believe the only way you can and Hezbollah believe the only way you can deal with that problem is by annihilating Israel. They've never accepted Israel's right to exist. By denying that Israel has any historical claims to the land, by trying to wipe out history of Israel. By doing that, you see a concerted effort to isolate and destroy Israel, and that is and that's their policy. That was Arafat's policy. It's been the policy of who got a peace prize for because Israel agreed to give land in exchange for Arafat saying, "I won't kill you," try to kill you, and then a short while later, Arafat went back to trying to kill him. But that's the fact is the people who are opposed to Israel in the region want Israel dead and gone and forgotten. That's their objective. And we just have to be aware of that, and as opposed to avoid being complicit. I'm going to sign off now. I appreciate you all tuning in, and we will be back tomorrow. I got some comments from some people asking me where I'd been. Hadn't been on for a couple of days, and I had some stuff I had to do at home, and so it was, and so I had to take care of some personal stuff at home that it's not health. It's just we're getting some things done in the house, and I took some personal days to deal with that. So with that, I appreciate you all's concern, and we will talk to you guys tomorrow, and hopefully have something that's a little happier. Bye-bye.